there's one thing I glossed over slightly in my previous video in terms of the Gunslinger's perk. Now, I was discussing this with someone else, and a good point was made that was the better perk Knife Juggler over Incendiary Blade, and actually I do believe it is. Throwing knife catches enemies on fire, dealing additional damage over time. Now, that sounds good in practice, but it's not like Thorn death over time or damage over time. Is nowhere near has the same effect, and really you're using a throwing knife either to finish off a kill or to get a lot of damage down and finish it off with a gun, because it obviously doesn't, a throwing knife doesn't actually kill someone with full health, but you're not really kind of throwing at them and then leaving and then running away and leaving them to kind of finish them off with the damage over time. The damage over time doesn't have enough of an effect, and it's short range most of the time. You know, you're throwing knives at very close range, so it's close range action, so again it's not really likely to have an effect. So getting a precision kill immediately resetting its cooldown, i.e. you get a throwing knife straight away. I actually didn't read that properly when I was reading that perk, so I didn't realise it actually gives you a throwing knife straight away if you get a precision kill. So that is a lot more useful than the Incendiary Blade, so I've actually switched to using that perk now.
When it comes to armour, the two things I want to consider first are what weapons am I using and what game mode am I playing. The weapons I use determines what perks I want for my armour. So for example, if I'm using a hand cannon like the Last Word or Thorn, I generally will want quick reload as a perk. Okay, but if for example I'm using something like Red Death, which is a weapon I use a lot, then it has its own speedy reload or quick reload perk, and obviously it also has the each kill heals me quicker, so great perk there. But yeah, I already have the speed reload, so I don't need that on my armor. Okay, I'm also using a sniper rifle as well. Don't really need any perks for that, maybe except for carry more ammo, but that's necessarily the most important perk I'm looking for. The main perk I am looking for is increased grenade throw distance. Obviously grenades are a very important part in winning a gunfight, and I find having the increased grenade throw distance a very important perk for grenades. So having established what perks I want with regards guns I have equipped, the next step is thinking about what game mode I'm playing. So the two main types of game modes are 6v6 game modes, so Control and Clash, or just smaller team modes, so Skirmish, which is 3v3, or Elimination, or Trials, which is again 3v3, or something like Rumble, which is obviously a free-for-all 1v6 essentially. And the main difference between the two is I'm generally going to stay alive longer in the bigger game mode, so I'm going to get more kill streaks in 6v6, whereas say for example playing Trials, clearly I'm going to die a lot more, okay, and I'm going to respawn every round, okay, so there's quite a difference there. So respawning every round means with my Lucky Raspberry chest piece I have a new grenade every round, so therefore I don't really need a high discipline, because I'm not going to be live long enough where I'm going to need another grenade within the same round. Okay, so each respawn I get a new grenade anyway. So discipline, which obviously reduces the cooldown of your grenades, is pretty pointless in Trials. Okay, but if it's something like Clash, which I play a lot of, then generally my average lifespan is going to be a lot longer. You know, I'm going to go on 10, 15 kill streaks. Therefore, I'm going to want another grenade at some point during that kill streak. If I can. So therefore I will look for a much higher discipline value. Okay. So the way I've got it set up at the moment, this is something I would use potentially for something like Elimination or Trials, or Skirmish maybe as well, because Skirmish, again, you generally don't go on like the same kind of kill streaks, unless you're playing extremely well against a very poor team. For me personally anyway, I'm not going to go on extremely long 20 kill streaks like I can in the 6v6 game modes. So again, I'm not going to look for a high discipline value when I have the Lucky Raspberry equipped, because I'm going to spawn with a grenade every time I die anyway, so it's a pretty pointless having a high discipline. What I do want is high strength, because obviously that reduces the cooldown of my throwing knives, and these don't reset upon respawning. Okay, so as I've explained, my two main close range weapons are grenades and the throwing knife, so I want to make sure that the cooldown is reset as soon as possible once I've used the first two. Okay, so I'm using armor that gives me a very high strength setting. Okay, and then lastly the golden gun. Now I don't use my supers as nowhere near as much as I should. Okay, and I'm not a massive fan of supers generally. I'm more of a fan of coming from Call of Duty background, where gun skill is what wins wins the game, not using other things like supers and, you know, heavy weapons, etc. So I'm not a massive user of my super, but I'm also of the belief that if you get more gun kills, you're going to get your super quicker. So your armor should be suited to what will enable you to win a gunfight. Okay. So if I win more gunfights, my super will be, you know, I will get my super much quicker. Okay. So it just so happens because I use the Lucky Raspberry, which is all intellect, so it has a very high intellect setting. So, I naturally have a high intellect. So my golden gun cooldown is actually very good, but the rest of the armor I've used is just to focus on getting the strength where I can. Okay, so, you know, carry more ammo for heavy weapons. I don't need that because I've got that on the Lucky Raspberry, and obviously that's not a PvP perk or the second perk anyway, but I just want the strength setting from it. Okay, and I have the increased grenade throw distance from my helmet, but again, you know, I'm looking discipline strength, intellect strength, whatever possible, just get strength. Okay, and obviously it depends on what armor you have. I have a significant amount, but not as much as I could have, but you can see, you know, it gives me the strength I need, and it gives me, I have decent cooldown on my golden gun, and I don't need the discipline. So if I was to play a 6v6, I would change that, and I would look to have a much higher discipline value, because grenades are more important than my throwing knife. So if I want to go on good kill streaks, then, you know, I want the high discipline and slightly lower strength, because obviously I'm going to swap some of these out for some discipline. So, you know, maybe something like this. I don't need this. So again, I'll look for something that has intellect and discipline rather than intellect and strength. And I want this because I want the grenade throw distance. So you can see straight away, you know, it's jumped up. I would mess around a little bit more and try and get it a bit higher, but you can see I'm getting a much higher discipline value, which is what I would use for a 6v6 game mode. The next thing I'm going to talk about is throwing knives. And as mentioned in my previous video, I utilise a combination of the trip mine grenade and starting with 2 throwing knives as my short range weapons. Because I'm mostly using a pulse rifle and a sniper, they are clearly medium to long range weapons, and therefore I have nothing outside of those to use in short range gunfights. So I utilise the trip mine and the throwing knives. Just like trip mine grenades, throwing knives are most useful in close range situations and scenarios where you have limited vertical space, so corridors, doorways, basically anywhere where it's easy to line up the opposing player into the centre of your sights. That brings me on to how to actually aim the throwing knife. You want to utilise it the same way you would a weapon, in the fact that you want the person to be directly in the centre of your screen, like you would if you were ADSing someone. You want them directly ahead of you in the centre of your screen, so therefore all you need to do is compensate for whether they are above you, below you, or directly ahead of you. You don't want to be compensating for your left and right aim, it's just up and down movements. And if you look at my first example, which I'll slow down, you can see the person is coming at me at my level, because obviously it's on a level, on ground level, and they're coming directly in the centre of my screen. So therefore it's very easy just to flick, you know, the trigger to trigger the throwing knife. And it's the same thing in the second kill, except we're not on the ground, we're actually both in mid-air, but you can see I wait until we are both level. He's in the centre of my screen again, but we are both level horizontal height. It just happens to be in mid-air, and then I flick the switch to trigger the throwing knife. The third example is one where, again, he's in the middle of my screen, but I'm above him, so I just have to compensate for the fact that I have to aim down, but he's still directly ahead of me, so it's just a case of compensating for the difference in height between myself and the opponent. And once again, you can see in the next example, I miss with the first throwing knife as he just flicks out of the centre of my screen, and then again I wait until he is at the same vertical height as me and in the centre of my screen. Again, we are in mid-air, and then I hit the throwing knife. So the overriding thing to remember is you want the person to be in the centre of your screen when aiming, and then you just want to compensate for the height difference between you and your opponent, whether he's above you, below you, or at the same level as you. And only trigger it when you know he's in the centre of the screen and you know exactly the height difference between the two, so you can compensate for that. And finally, similar to the use of trip mine grenades, the sort of maps that it's useful on, and particularly my favourite is Anomaly. Other maps like Cauldron, for example, anywhere has kind of tight spaces, like some of the areas of Blind Watch, and you can see on this last example with 3 kills within the same game using the throwing knife, and in particular they're all against people using shotguns. You can see they're all rushing me with shotguns, and I'm just waiting patiently for them to line them up where they're close range, where I can hit them with the throwing knife when they're at the centre of my screen, and when I know that the height compensation the vertical compensation I need to use, and then finish them off with my primary where needed. So I hope that two-part was useful. Hunter is my main character for PvP, and the Gunslinger build is very much my go-to subclass on smaller maps, or maps where I know I'll encounter quite a lot of close gunfights in tight spaces.